Hello, everybody. So this is a study night with Women Who Code Portland. Trisha and I are co-leads for the design study nights, and our topic tonight is accessibility design principles and strategies. We have the amazing Kari Goin Kono. I think I got that right. She is from Portland State University, and we'll give a longer introduction to her in just a moment. But we are super excited to have her. This is a topic that we've wanted to talk about basically all year. And for packed schedule that we had to wait till the end of the year. And she thankfully was still interested after everything that happened. So thank you so much for being here, Kari. We are very much looking forward to your talk. And so this is the agenda for tonight. We're just going to go over Women Who Code for anyone who's new or returning. It's always just good to reflect back on our mission. We'll give our further intro to Kari, go through her presentation, and then do a group product evaluation and go over some user research tactics with those. And then we'll go ahead and wrap up, I think. And then just to cover some quick online best practices, do mute yourself when you're not speaking. Like we mentioned before, we do encourage everyone to participate during the event if you have questions or if you need clarification on anything, or if you're having an issue, you can also reach out to Trisha or I in the chat. And do turn on your video if you feel comfortable. So video on, mute on as a standard, and then you can set your. So Women Who Code is a global nonprofit dedicated to inspiring women to excel in technology careers. We focus on helping women start and maintain careers. So not only getting the courage to jump into a male-dominated career, but also to feel comfortable staying and supported in your career. We are a 501c3 and we're international. So not only do we have a chapter here in Portland, Oregon, but we go as far. I think I signed up for an event in San Francisco just because that's on my my time zone. But there are events across the world. So if you're a night owl, or if you just like to participate in other events, we can share a link to the Women Who Code Global Events page where we can you can sign up for events with members all around the world. Super exciting. We envision a world where women are representative as technical executives, founders, venture capitalists, board members, and software engineers. And in these design study nights, we're really focusing on rounding out the skill set of engineers. So it's always helpful to have a design eye, and then especially on topics like accessibility, knowing how to really support your end users, all of your end users, in 100%. So not just in ways that are obvious, but also those that help those with disabilities, but can help everyone. For example, the closed captioning transcripts, those help me when I don't want to go on off of turn my volume on. It's helpful for everyone. Okay, and then Chris is going to take this one on for the code of conduct while I will share the link to the form.
Sure. So this is our short code of conduct. Kaylin will be posting a link to the full one in the chat. Women Who Code is dedicated to providing an empowering experience for everyone who participates in or supports our community, regardless of gender, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, ability, physical appearance, body size, race, ethnicity, age, religion, socioeconomic status, caste, or creed. Our events are intended to inspire women to excel in technology careers, and anyone who is here for this purpose is welcome, because we value the safety and security of our members and strive to have an inclusive community. We do not tolerate harassment of members or event participants in any form. Our code of conduct applies to all events run by Women Who Code Inc. If you would like to report an incident or contact our leadership team, please submit an incident report form, which Kaylin will put in the chat. And if you need to contact one of us immediately, you can contact us through chat. Our names are Trisha Leach and Kaylin Nelson, who are the leaders for this design study night. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, Trisha. I love having some help introducing this. This is very important. I love the code of conduct. It really speaks to our values, but it is a mouthful. So thank you so much, Trisha, for that. You can follow us on Twitter, Slack, Instagram, and our meetup page. We will send all these links in the chat to make it easier for you to find us. And then we'll also send, I think Trisha already sent the link to find us on Slack, to fill out the form to become one of our members there. We do have a pretty active group, and there are lots of channels. So if you want to focus more on JavaScript or database engineering, then you can find the place for you. And if you don't find your community, if there's not enough going on in Python, then you can maybe step up to be a Python lead. So lots going on there, and we would be super happy to have you. I don't actually think we have a representative from 52 Limited tonight. I think it's just us at Women Who Code, but we do on other events have 52 Limited as a sponsor. They are a tech and creative staffing agency. So if you are looking for a job or have someone that would be a great candidate for them to connect with, we'd be happy to connect you with them. They are super fun, super energetic, and really, really want to get you a job that you feel really fulfilled in. So just let us know if you want us to reach out. And without further ado, here is Kari Goin Kono, Senior User Experience Designer at the Office of Academic Innovation at Portland State University. You can find her on Twitter and I think elsewhere as Kari Goin, and I'll let her elaborate. Thank you so much for being here, Kari.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to everyone for making the time to be here. I am going to share my screen with some slides. Hopefully you don't see yourselves for too long. Okay, although let's start at the top. Okay. All right, thank you again for having me. I'm here to talk to you today about accessibility design principles and strategies. Just to introduce myself quickly. Oh, my arrow keys aren't working.
Not very accessible.
That is interesting. All right, maybe what we'll do is.
Is there a click, or maybe it's the bottom left there are the arrows?
Let's see if I can go to the next slide. Oh, it wants me to go here. Okay, that's weird. All right. My pronouns are she, her. My accessibility needs, which I think is really important to start off meetings, indicating that. So if you have specific accessibility needs, such as taking a break, go ahead and self-select and do that. But if it's something that I can better describe or do in my presentation, go ahead and put that in the chat. I'm realizing also that when I'm in presenter mode, I don't see the chat. So if someone can just unmute and tell me
we'll flag
if something like that happens, that would be great. Thank you. So a little bit just about me and some of my identities: white, cis, female. I love to bake. Sometimes people think of that as an identity. I'm an artist, I'm able-bodied, I'm a wife, I'm a learner, and really, I have it last, but so importantly, I'm a new pup mom to a 6-month puppy. So just for fun, I thought I'd share some photos of Ren, my 6-month-old German wirehair, because I'm just a proud dog mom. So, okay, a little bit about what we're gonna do today. Our goals, I have a few for us, but I'd really love to hear if you have specific ones, because I invite discussion and questions at any time. I'd love to, while we're on a slide, talk about your questions. So I invite that in any moment. And if you have really extensive questions, we can save those and do some discussion or collaboration there at the end. But if you have specific goals, go ahead and add them to into the chat. And for that, I'm going to escape just so that I potentially, when I'm sharing, I can't see, so that doesn't matter. So anyone let me know, pop in if you have specific goals on your mic. But what I've outlined for us today is we're going to talk about the basics of digital accessibility. Some of this might not be new to some of you, and some of it might be the first time you're ever hearing it. I hope that even if you are ingrained in doing digital accessibility, that I can bring some new perspectives to this. As a UX designer, I can bring some of that user experience to your knowledge of web accessibility. And if you're brand new, that's where I'm starting us all. So we're all there together. More importantly, the outcome is we're going to learn to recognize exclusion and then be able to have discussions about how to design for inclusion. Collaboratively, we're going to work together and have discussions about how we can take collective action to make the web better for all of our users. If there's a moment that anyone has a specific goal, I'd love to hear it before we move on to the next slide. If anyone is brave. Okay, let's go. Please come in if it comes to you later. So a quick agenda. I'm going to do what I call a mini lesson on digital accessibility. I call it mini because it's just 4 things, but there's so much that we can support each other to do around accessibility.
We had one comment in the chat. Andrew says he's here to unlearn.
Oh, great.
Sounds like
let's talk about unlearning. We can talk. So really, after the mini lesson, that might be all that you can show up for today. That's just where you are, and that's great. If you're interested to stick around a little longer after the mini lesson, which is about 15 minutes or 20, I'm going to share a user testing report from some of my work that I do with a screen reader user on a product. And then at the end, we're going to just do some collaborative testing and evaluation. So, and at the end there, that this can be discussion based. We can do this together. You can do it on your own. You can just watch, just depending on what your needs and how you feel like you can show up today. It's all flexible for you based on what your needs are. So that's what we're going to do today. And unlearning, we can talk all about unlearning. So that could be at the end there too. Before we begin, because a lot of the work I'm going to talk about today is around inclusion, I find it really important to acknowledge the land. So I'm going to do a land acknowledgement. I'm here in Southeast Portland in Multnomah County, so I'm going to acknowledge the land here. By doing a land acknowledgement, we honor the indigenous people whose traditional and ancestral homelands we stand on. The Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Tumwater, Watlala bands of the Chinook, the Tualatin, Kalapuya, and many other indigenous nations of the Columbia River. We do a land acknowledgement to acknowledge the ancestors of this place and recognize that we are here because of the sacrifices forced upon them. And remembering these communities, we honor their legacy, lives, and descendants. If you're not in Portland or Multnomah County, I've linked the native land map here for you so that you can understand the land that you occupy.
And I don't know if we clarified this before, but we will be sharing the slides after this. So you'll be able to have access to this.
Thank you. You'll have access to the links. Thank you. So here's our mini lesson. We're going to learn 4 things. We're going to talk about headers, self-describing links, color, and images. This is a design study night. I am a designer, but I hope that some of this will be relevant to some of the markup that you're used to working in when you're programming. So with headers, we have 1 through 6. Usually our very first header on a page is the H1. Some of the common mistakes that I see are to give fonts based on the size that you want, a number between H1 and H6. So for example, H1 would be the largest font and H6 would be the smallest font. Headers are actually structural elements within your page that screen reader users or people who only navigate using your keyboard use to quickly disseminate information on a page and in a website. And so really, they're really structural mile markers. So if you're using them for font size, it's going to really create a horrible user experience for anyone using a keyboard. So just a good guide to follow is 1 H1 per page. And I'm going to show an example of what that might look like and how we could maybe have a discussion about maybe doing it better. Think of headers as containers for other headers, so sort of Tupperware. So if you have an H2, it's always under an H1. That's pretty straightforward. But any H3s are going to be under an H2. Like I said, our next slide, we'll go look at this in practice. And just another tip from some of my work with doing testing, user testing with screen reader users is we come across buttons, links, and images that are labeled as headers, and it's really confusing and creates a poor user experience. So I would say maybe think of this as an avoid, notice and avoid. So just a quick example that I'm going to share. So I've chosen Degs.coffee as a Black-owned business here in Portland to show you the idea of what a header would look like. So if we come to a coffee page, when I've inspected this page, did this work previously, this Haiti is listed as their H1, excuse me. And so it doesn't really tell us any information about the page or describing in any way. So what I think we're missing is an H1 more here that tells us what we're looking at. And this is the H2. So if this is a container inside of this, we're not really following the markup. And maybe that's okay, but maybe we want to talk about what that user experience is going to be like for a screen reader user who shows up to the page and they hear Haiti, because it's not all that's on the page. But to them, that's all that it is there. Another example that's maybe more of a traditional outlining is I chose a blog, and actually it's a post by Kat Holmes, which I highly recommend, and I've linked her book later. But we have the title of the article is the H1. So this is the H1, and then the subtitles here are the H2s. So that's really a traditional way to think of how you would navigate using headers. Okay. All right. I'm going to move on to self-describing links. I'm going to move you all down to the bottom so that I can, there we go. So screen readers such as JAWS, NVDA, and VoiceOver are going to read out each individual letter of a URL if you include it. And so, for example, if you had the Women Who Code URL, it's going to read out https://. So it's really not something that can be quickly and efficiently navigated by someone who's navigating using a keyboard. So we really want to avoid just putting in straight URLs. And this is also a clean URL. Think about the URLs like maybe, let's say, a Google Doc that has like 1 million characters that don't make sense. That's going to be a really poor user experience for someone who needs to like find a page and quickly find the answer to something they're looking for. This is one of the most common mistakes that I see in my work, really around content authoring, but I see it all the time. Also, for example, maybe you're linking Go here. Screen reader users will actually pull up in JAWS all the links on a page and navigate through just links. And so if they get a link that says Go here, they have no idea in what context that link is for. So the third option I've posted here says, check out the Women Who Code website for more info, and Women Who Code website is linked. That's a self-describing link because you're hyperlinking where that link is going, self-describing. And so I want to come back to my second bullet here at the top that says, click here is ableist language. I also see a lot of this meaning that you are specifically using language for people with not a range of abilities. So clicking is something that someone on a mouse would do. So it's not necessarily inclusive for all people. And that brings me to
we did have a question, Kari.
Okay, sure.
In the, I believe it's for the coffee website, Kay is asking in an article like the one you just showed, oh, sorry, the article, how would you handle the website's header? So that was a good example.
The coffee or the inclusion?
I think she's referring to the inclusion article.
The inclusion article, no, I was mentioning this as a good format because with the H1 is the title of the article. So
then the coffee shop website, that one is just not as optimal because it's not really clearly describing the H1, what's on the page.
Right, so it's a new page. So when we come back to the home page and you go to like any of their coffee, you know, there's no, potentially this is their, you know, they're labeling this as an H1 when really it's probably an H2. And they don't have an H1 on this page. So they don't say dead stock coffee anywhere. There's no indication of what the hierarchy is. So I think there could be a discussion on how to do it better and how to redesign this web page. I think you would want to think about like adding an extra header, what does that look like for mobile? I think what I can point out is that starting with Haiti is problematic because there isn't any description of the page. It's just a description of the name of the coffee. It doesn't even say coffee.
Okay, so she's actually clarified the question,
Okay.
or they have, so they're saying, how would envision be handled? So in this case, you mentioned maybe the dead stock coffee would be the H1, or in here, how does the header or the title of the site compare to the title of the article?
I shared this as a good example. I didn't fully inspect this page, so I haven't like gone through and looked at every header here. But what I did look at is what do they have labeled as their H1 and how are they having someone navigate this page using headers? So that was the task that I took. And the title of the article is the H1. Right? So if we took that same principle and applied it to dead stock coffee, they have the name of the coffee as their H1. It's just not descriptive enough. So you know, we want to have discussions about, you know, this might require a user test, right? Asking some users, what do they find confusing about just listening from your keyboard? They don't look, or there's no visual associated. What do they hear when they what do they think when they hear Haiti without a visual? Haiti, $15.
So it doesn't sound like you need to mention dead stock coffee or envision. It just is needing to specify the product or the article title, the point of it better.
Right. I guess my recommendation to their web designer would be to have a header that names dead stock coffee as the H1 and Haiti as the H2. And the design of that we would have to have conversations, user testing, you know, or some more design planning. I hope that helps. I mean, we can go through and do some quick wireframing later if someone's really interested in how we might problem solve around that. Most importantly is drawing your attention to that might be confusing for people navigating without the image to guide them.
Thank you.
Okay, great. That's such a good question. Okay. We were on, so the inclusion article by Kat Holmes, this is from her book, but it really gets to the center of that ability is a spectrum. We have permanent ability and disability. We have temporary and situational. At any point in time, we are on the spectrum and potentially at times could come off the spectrum. The goal is to be able to design your product for anyone within the spectrum to efficiently and effectively use your product. And to some people that might be extremely overwhelming, but really what it is having conversations that center equity, center the people who would be most harmed by your product or experience not working out, and really trying to do the best work that you can, constantly improving it. Here, I really just want to highlight in the image here, let me just describe it. So we have a permanent, temporary, situational image with a couple of actions, touch, see, hear, and speak. An example from the image is your touch might be impacted because you have a permanent disability of one arm. Your touch might be impacted because you have a temporary disability of an injured arm. Your touch might be impacted because of a situational disability, meaning that your arms are full, you have a new baby in your arm. So really just highlighting that this is temporary, situational, and permanent, and disability and ability are on a spectrum. So much of this work is about inclusion and usability. I wanted to share an example from one of the course management systems that I work in, because I think that it's sort of some gray area. So we have here a link, a self-describing link, because that's what we're kind of talking about. Click here to download the export zip package. So the link does describe where it's going, but it also uses ableist language. Click here. And it's just usability wise, we don't need all of that. We can accomplish the same task by saying download the zip package, or just download zip package. So it's really just streamlining sometimes and getting rid of clunky pieces that don't always fit what the usability needs are.
I have a quick question on zip specifically. I've gone back and forth with this as a designer. So zip code is literally an acronym, and the zip file that's also an acronym. So in this case, I see it's like got the capital Z and the lowercase IP. I feel that a screen reader would read it better as zip versus ZIP. What's your experience with that, if you have it?
I think that it looks to me like it's one word, but I could be wrong. I think it's going to read it as zip.
So even if it's all caps, it doesn't read ZIP, or you might have to test that one.
It doesn't. Yeah. I think it might depend on the screen reader that you're using, but for a while they were reading acronyms at like at a louder volume. And that's been updated. My screen reader told me that she now, because for a while it would like shout at her, like zip, and like that's startling. And so I would like advise, don't use acronyms, right? You do with something else. But they're no longer increasing the volume, or that might be a long outdated feature. I'm not sure. So I think it just would read zip to her. It's not going to read out the acronym. I'm not sure if you put a period. I'm not sure about some of that. Someone else might know more than me. Does that help answer?
I think we also have one other question in the chat from Lindsay. She's asking, do screen readers pick up commented out H1s? So she means commented out in the code.
I don't believe so, but I'm not 100% certain.
I can do some quick research and see if I can figure that out.
Great. I am going to, on my product report, we'll talk a little bit about some product experience with I think it gets into some H1s, but that's later. Okay. Some examples that I have. I just have some visual examples, so it's not the most accessible. I have added alt text to all my images for those who may need that later. But I just wanted to share some examples that I come across. I just save a folder of all of these, and I'm so thrilled that I get to share them all with you right now. But here's an example. I was trying to upload a document to my HR, and I've made the text a little bigger because it's hard to see, and I've put a red box around it, and I'll read it. Select the green attach button below to attach your document. So using the word below, up, left, right is all ableist because someone using a screen reader, it doesn't follow the same linear structure as we do visually. So I always, when I'm giving feedback on our website, note that for my team. Also, my browser, for whatever reason, wasn't rendering the green, so I have no idea what they're talking about. So my ability at this point in time was impacted as far as like the software for uploading this form, and I couldn't figure out how to do this, which was super frustrating. So these are some, if the instructions can just address the name of the button, then it would make the form, the usability of the form work better. So sometimes it's not always in our programming or in our design. Sometimes it's in our instructions and our language that we're using. Another example here is, I was looking at a student data dashboard, and I came to the page that said For best user experience, please use Internet Explorer to view dashboards. I saw a cringe. Yes. To use Internet Explorer to view the dashboards listed in the menu bar on the left. Menu bars are not always on the left for everybody. Sometimes they choose to move them around. If you're a screen reader, you're probably either skipping the menu or pulling it up in a different order. So to the left doesn't include you. You don't even know what that means. And also Internet Explorer is, I mean, maybe it's your browser of choice, but to me feels like it's potentially outdated. I don't have it downloaded on my computer. So that's an interesting limited experience. So what I'm beginning to showcase here is a culture of exclusion. And we're starting to notice that the text and the experiences that are designed are signaling exclusion. Let's get to a few more examples because I have so many more. Okay, oh, I'm pointing it out to you. Okay, color contrast. Our third item in our mini lesson. I'm trying to keep track of our time. I think we're okay. So the two things to just pay attention to here, having sufficient contrast between your foreground and your background. This is primarily an issue with text. So that's mainly where you see some problems. Avoiding light on light and dark on dark. And I promise after my section on color, you'll never not see it again. But just to give you an example of an at-home website here, we have the Join Us button in a Women Who Code snapshot on the website. We have a dark teal and a white text that is accessible. We're able to see it. Our next image is a member benefit and coding resources link that are dark colors against a light gray background. Also, there's sufficient contrast. What we find sneaky here is under the menu hover options. We have a dark teal on a dark gray, which is inaccessible. It's a small element, but once again, starting to signal exclusion with color. A few more examples of signaling exclusion with color. This is one of my style guides in Figma for my work. It's really sneaky to find, but in the menu bar at the top, there's a light purple circle that indicates my icon for my user profile with a white K. The light purple and white text for the K. The colors are inaccessible. We also have a background color that's the hex color is in orange. Yellows, oranges, pastels, always, forever, never, ever, ever accessible with white. So that's just a few examples. Here's another new site. We have a pink menu bar that's really pulling your visual into their menu bar, but with white text, it's not accessible. So signaling exclusion. Here's a Strava app, orange and white, not accessible. And we have it used throughout the app as branding, and it's just signaling exclusion at all these levels. So one more example here. This is Untapped. It's like a beer app where you rate beer. A gold header with a white Discover text, also inaccessible color combinations. But also pulling you to interact with the app by using yellow as well. Also inaccessible, another signal for the inaccessible colors. I recently read an article with someone debating how inaccessible was this color combo choice, and did it really impact the user experience where they couldn't see what they were doing? And their decision was that it didn't truly affect, and the visual benefits for people who could see far outweighed the consequences. So I just want to call that out and address it and say that if you are not of the user group who's impacted, meaning you aren't colorblind or low vision, you do not get to make decisions about people who have those abilities and disabilities. So it's really important if you are colorblind to say this experience does affect me or does not affect me, but I also know that there's a range of abilities where it could affect them. And the best thing we can do is design for any user to signal inclusion at any time. So our last one is going to be about alt text for images, alternative text.
Before we move on, we've got a
sure,
question from Allison asking if you have any color contrast tools that you like to use.
Yeah, I do. I have a checker that I'm going to share. Actually, why don't I just share it right now? So I have it linked in the slides. So one of our exercises we're going to do at the end is to use the color contrast checker by WebAIM. Someone could Google it and share it in the chat. But that's, it looks like I can actually, I'm sharing so I can't share it. But I always come here and check, and it just tells you if you're passing or failing the web accessibility content guideline. When I do like contract reviews for reviewing accessibility on websites, I'll just screenshot this and send it to them.
Nice.
It's such a useful tool to say, nope, here you go. So I hope that is useful to you. Okay.
Thanks. Somebody got it in the chat too.
Great. Y'all rock. Okay. So let's talk about images, and let's talk about images of text. Here we have a quote by a local designer who I love. I've included her information later on. She's Portland, Tatiana Mack. She talks a lot about inclusion and accessibility local here to Portland. Her image here is designer intent does not erase user impact. So this is really important when you're thinking about just because you intend to have the best experience, if your users had a poor experience, that impact is what you should focus on. And your intentions can be the best, and it doesn't matter because the impact is ultimately poor. So talking about images of text, we want to avoid that at all costs if you can. If you can't, then your alternative text for your image, I'm going to show you, should be the text. So the alternative text for this is designer intent does not erase user impact. So making sure that your alternative text is linked there. Okay. Here's another example of alternative text that's really different. Here I have a screenshot of the Women Who Code website. What I'm focusing on is an icon. So it's not listed as an image tag. It's actually an icon that's a link. So the text, coding resources, does not actually link or go anywhere. So the element that is navigable, so someone can navigate to it, doesn't go anywhere. It's just text. But the icon has no alternative text and no focusability by a keyboard. So you can't actually navigate to it on your keyboard. You need your mouse, and it also serves a key function. So not only would someone using a screen reader or navigating just by their keyboard not be able to access it, they also wouldn't know what it's for. So even though it's an icon, it's not an image. So it's a slightly different approach, but just knowing that these are areas that are creating frustrating user experiences for your users.
That's great. Thank you for the mini audit. We can pass this along.
There's so much good there. I don't want to underscore all the good that's happening. But I like,
just reminds us
let's call it out, and let's work together to bring attention to how we could make it better.
We do welcome the feedback for sure. We did a service blueprinting workshop with the Service Design PDX, and they also gave us a lot of tips for growing our member registration process. So
great.
I'm taking notes for sure.
That's awesome. That's great. This is my last intensive on the Women Who Code website. You're done. But let's look at a few other examples. I'm sharing Jerome Harris's website. He's a really like powerful graphic designer doing some really cool work. So that in the slides you're linked here. But here's his website. Orange on pink, right away signals exclusion. So his website's not for everybody. His images of his work are not keyboard focusable, and there's no alternative text. So someone who would maybe be able to discover his work couldn't unless it was a certain, unless you're of a certain population of people. So sometimes your designs intend to include people and focus on a population or an area of equity and inclusion when at the same time you're excluding. So it's important to start noticing what's excluding, what's signaling that exclusion.
I have a question for that.
Oh, sure.
How do you know if the image is keyboard focusable? So I see you've inspected this element. Could you run through how you do that in Google Chrome?
Yeah. Let's go to Chrome's website. So I'm going to use the Chrome. I'm in the Chrome browser, and I just want to look at what one of his images is telling me. And so I'm going to control click on my Mac. I'm sorry, I'm not a PC user. If someone's PC, please let me know how you click there. Inspect, and then it's going to pull up my inspector, and I'm just going to choose my arrow and select my item, and it's going to tell me what it is in the code. And you can look into it and look at the CSS. You can actually play with the code and see what it would look like to change it. It doesn't actually change it, just playing around for yourself. So this for me helps me to understand what's here and what's not here. And sometimes it will tell you, like if I hover here, it's not telling me, sometimes it will tell you if it is accessible. So it'll have a check if it's accessible on the color combos. As far as keyboard focusable, I would need a programmer to tell you more about adding a label. It could potentially an ARIA code, but something that you can navigate to in your code. So I would need their help to help me understand. But when I was reading a little bit about it for this presentation, I was understanding that there are things you can add in about order and making things, adding in those labels. I wish I had a better answer for that.
I just put a note in the chat also that while we're focusing on digital design accessibility tonight, that we're planning to have a development specific session in 2021. So to keep an eye out for that one. And also if you have any specific questions about development practices, that there are lots of developers in our Slack who I'm sure would be happy to share their knowledge too.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm not a programmer, so I can't always tell you how the best ways to get that focus in. What I can tell you is I can highlight the issue and bring it to the engineering team and say, my users can't access this. And later I'm going to show you when you follow the exact web content accessibility guidelines or a checklist. And I want to preface this with, there are international standards for accessibility on web design. There is a very comprehensive checklist that can be overwhelming. I have chosen 4 of these items, 4 sub-items, but there are many, many, many more. When you follow a checklist, you're going to ultimately harm your users. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that after our mini lesson. I have a specific case study where I'm going to show you what the work they've done and how I would start to critique it. So that's to come if you have the opportunity to stay. Thank you. Okay, so I want to summarize here that this mini lesson and accessibility that I've mentioned, it's really about power. It's about each of our own power that we have in designing the web and in designing digital experiences. We have the voice to speak up and push back. I'll tell you, you get a lot of pushback when it takes more time and more money to build or design accessibly. And sometimes it starts with small steps. And we are each powerful in order to start to recognize exclusion everywhere you go and start pushing back on making things inclusive. Antoinette Carroll is a designer and founder of the Creative Reaction Lab. She's doing really incredible work right now. And I went to her conference back when we could meet in person. And I pulled this quote that it's our responsibility as designers, I want to extend this to programmers and engineers, to create the condition for inclusivity. Without it, we're just leaving people behind. So ultimately here, I've talked to you about accessibility, but I'm really starting to lead you towards usability. And ultimately, there's one more aspect to this feature of inclusive design, which is making things equitable. And there's some various aspects. I'm going to show some case studies of what that will look like. So here I have a graphic on equality and equity. I'm going to just describe it here for any who may not be able to look directly at the screen. But we have a woman in a wheelchair, a taller person, a shorter person, and a child. Each of these people receive a bike that is the same size. And that is the definition there of equality. Equity, on the other hand, has the woman in a wheelchair to be able to use the bicycle now has a wheelchair adaptable bike. The taller person has a taller bike. The shorter person has a shorter bike, and the child has a child's bike. Every person's needs are met. And so equity here becomes really important in that flexibility is really key. Sometimes that means making things more simple. It means taking out text or making things less complicated. We have a really cool graphic designer's website with hot pink and orange. It grabs your eye, but it also leaves behind a whole group of users who are feeling excluded because they can't read or see or interact with his site. So just a couple examples on equity in design. Here's an example of signing up for basically any account online, and you have to answer those security questions. I pulled in this example of, in what city or town did your mother and father meet, which signals that you have two opposite sex parents. I was raised by a single father, so that doesn't necessarily meet my life experiences. Right away, signaling exclusion. Today, I was working with my screen reader user tester, who's a student. We're learning to use QuickTime so that they can record videos and send them to me of them testing products. And we found that the audio is automatically turned off when you start using QuickTime. So they had to go through an enormous amount of settings just to be able to understand where that audio is. So it's something that wasn't intended for them to be able to start using right away. And it's frustrating from a user's experience when they expect, when you record your screen, that the sound is on. Just a small user experience that really turned their whole day around with hours of extra work. This is my website or my office's website, and we're signaling that our the navigation text color isn't accessible. I didn't test it, but I can just tell you that green and white combo of the lighter green is not going to be accessible. And doing testing of our website with my screen reader user, the OAI Plus is actually our home link, but it's an image of text. So our alt text reads OAI Plus, as when we do images of text, we have that as our alternative text. But it actually serves as a function. It's actually a link to the home page. So if we navigate away from this page and want to get back, we need to click on that. And we weren't able to find their way back through our screen reader because they didn't know what was the home page and that this was actually had served a function. So just sort of critiquing some things that we can do better. Besides critique, I thought I'd sneak in a little tip for how we can make our social media a little more accessible. I don't know if you know, but you can add alternative text in Instagram. So if you upload an image and then you go to edit and you can add your alternative text in. This is something that I will call myself out on that I need to do better. I get so excited to share my Women Who Code presentation that I didn't add my alternative text in. And my screen reader user let me know this, that when you use camel case, so you capitalize every word, a screen reader will actually read it as Women Who Code instead of just trying to read out each individual letter or trying to sound out the word. So just a few different things we can do to just be more inclusive when we interact socially in social media. Okay, a few more examples. Let me see where we are on time, 6:30. So I have a couple more examples. And then I have like kind of an in-depth dive on accessibility, as well as some tips and resources, and then our exercise. Should I just keep going, or is someone interested in me skipping to the deep dive on the website? Not really deep dive, but it's more of an in-depth exploration of a website that tried to do accessibility, and I was going to critique it. And we'll get there, or we could just, we can jump to it, or we can keep going to some examples. I'd like to hear from anyone.
Maybe we can do like some thumbs up if you want to continue. And then if you don't do a thumbs up, then we'll
jump to,
yeah.
I just want to make sure we have time for everything, but if people are going to stick around, so thumbs up to jump or thumbs up to stay? Thumbs up to stay?
It'll be thumbs up to stay on course. So
I feel like
let's do the thumbs up one more time.
I saw a couple, like 4 or 5.
Yeah, let's just keep going.
Okay, keep going.
We also have one question in the chat. It's from Allison. When developing a digital product, do you have any recommendations on recruiting users to test for accessibility?
Pay them for their time.
Hard agree.
So I work with students. I pay them for their time. Anytime that this is something that I do constantly in my work at the university, is we're asked to do service, serve on committees, and they ask for students, and I always insist that we pay them.
So the students that you find, are they already people that use screen readers, or do you have them act as if they would use the screen reader naturally? What is your kind of, how do you find the specific audience you're looking to test for?
Well, I always recommend doing user testing with people with disabilities, so who natively use screen readers, and pay them for their time. If you're in Oregon, you can always reach out to the Oregon Commission for the Blind, but I also encourage you to build a community of people that you know that are blind. Reach out on LinkedIn, pay them for their time, even if it's just $20 to look at something. There are also people who do this testing that you can pay a lot more money to if you want something more professional. When you see the product report that I'm going to share with you, it's not super complicated. It's just documenting the steps and sharing out the experience. It's not super technical. But if you're going to ask people to test, as much as possible, test with people who have disabilities and pay them for their time. Always pay your users for their time, but don't skip that step, because you learn so much more and you make so many assumptions when you aren't physically prevented from. For me, I'm a visual person, so if I heard the word Haiti, I would make so many assumptions. But when I see the bag of coffee next to it, I immediately understand what the purpose is. As far as like just recruiting users to review your site, like if you don't have a budget or you're just scrambling for something, I do guerrilla research all the time. I just go talk to people in my family and say, tell me this, this, and this, right? So you can do all kinds of user testing and research that's just based on what your ability and needs are at that moment. Thanks, Allison. Is that right?
Yeah, that's Allison.
Thank you. Great. Cool. Quick example of an app. Nothing immediately jumps out as far as inaccessibility, but if you look a little closer, there's a login for your username, there's a password, there's a remember your username, there's a login. There's even a forget something, but you would think forget something would mean maybe you forgot your password or your username, but it just takes you to the Subaru website. So here you are, if you can't log in, if you can't remember your username or login, you're stuck. Already you're locked out, signaling exclusion. Here's one that's a little trickier. It's a bank, like a mobile image of logging into a bank. And we have nothing that signals exclusion, but is more something about usability. Each action that you can take is prefaced with a full image. So not even an SVG or an icon, but it's just a cognitive overload because you have a full image next to the action that you can take, and even a dot would be sufficient. So it's just an overwhelm, right? So as a user, it's just too much information and it takes away from the task that you're being asked to do. So that one is a little trickier. And some of this, you know, you bring to conversation to your team and you say, this feels like cognitive overload for these design reasons. And then you have a conversation. That's really where a lot of this starts. Here's one on equity that just bringing up, if you're asking someone to sign up for something, asking for their gender is completely unnecessary, and let's stop doing that. Okay, here's a really good one. This happened at my work last year. This is a video caption software that students and faculty use to record themselves doing video. It's an image of a young Black student with an icon of a gun with a flag sticking out, pointing at them. My media team said, we don't like this association of a gun being pointed at a Black student. So the company said, no problem, we got this. So they now point it away from the student. Instead of choosing a different icon, it now looks like the student is shooting someone else. So these representation pieces really matter when it can just be subbed out. If you're doing your code, I'm assuming that you can just sub in a different SVG icon. And if it's an image, you can just put in a new icon. You don't need to have this. So these are design decisions that are being made that are not recognizing the implications, right? Signaling exclusion. So much of inclusion has to do with design decisions that are made that signal exclusion. Here's an example of a conference that I've attended in the past in person. And what we have is a conference called Human-Centered Design, learn how to handle unexpected design scenarios and unusual situations. I received this summer. I take a look at the presenter list and I see 5 men and 1 woman, 1 person of color. So for my women of color in the audience, do you feel like you are represented in this panel? No, there's no women of color. There's no one with a disability, all white, a majority of white people centered, and a majority of men. In my office, we joke because in higher ed, we see this all the time. We call them manels. So we kind of joke about having, no more all male or mostly male panels. This is important. Representation matters. If we're talking about human-centered design, when the United States is in a time of social unrest, we need people of color, we need women of color centered here. So much of this work is about how we use and exercise our power and our voice. So I wrote them and said, I'm not going to be attending because I don't feel like the content I'm used to seeing from you is represented here. So some of the work that we're going to be talking about a little bit at the end is we're going to talk about collectively how we use this voice for action, because that's where we're going. Okay, I'm going to just take a small break because I'm going to talk about the US Census, which is a little heavy. I completed my US Census a few weeks ago. And the United States government has very strict rules around accessibility, and a lot of their websites are designed by firms that follow a lot of rules. However, there's a lot that signals exclusion here. First of all, I took a screenshot because I was upset, but I'm happy here now that I have an outlet to share it with you. I am limited to 2 choices, a binary of male and female. This is absolutely signaling exclusion. My next slide. the options that I had to choose from for race are white, Black, or African American, or American Indian or Native American, specifically called out, this census does not recognize Hispanic origin as race. So entire communities of my peers are being left out here, and funding is directed towards communities that need need funding and need other areas of support from our government, and it's just completely left out. White is at the top. It's centered as the most important. This is signaling exclusion to anyone else who does not fit that main narrative. The last one that I share is around my partner, my husband. The very first option is an opposite sex husband or wife or spouse is first. That's signaling that heteronormative narrative is first and most important. So much of this is signaling exclusion to anyone who doesn't fit that story. And
we
this
have
is
a quick question on the
Sure.
previous screen.
Okay.
There's like the top navigation, and then there's kind of the breadcrumbs. How
Mhm.
come the Hispanic origin is at the top before race?
That's a good question. I don't know, especially because it says that they're not races with this census. I don't recall specifically like the breadcrumb trail that I followed, so I can't say specifically.
I think the census usually asks if you have Hispanic origin or not, and then depending on your answer, then it asks more race questions afterwards.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So if you've had a chance to fill out your census, maybe, or if you haven't, maybe pay attention to what this experience is like for you.
And Diana has also added, the census has also never asked about American Sign Language usage in households, so we still don't have an accurate number of how big the community that uses ASL in their home is.
Thank you.
Not so fun fact.
That's really important. That's really important. Okay. This hot mess is so when we were told to work at home for me at Portland State, I needed to be able to access my voicemail at work. And here's how I do it. I would just follow this list, complicated maze. I could not figure this out. I had to get help. All the information may have been there, but I was lost. And this was literally something that was sent to me on how do I access my voicemail at work, which should just be a button. I really didn't understand why it needed to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 boxes of subcategories. So some of this documentation is real. I'm sure all of you are going to start now collecting your bad designs that you see everywhere now. But this is a horrible user experience for something that should be so simple. This one is from last week. I was ordering some takeout and I was taken on my phone to adding a tip, which was automatically set at 15%, and I wanted to go up to 20 and it wouldn't let me. It froze at 19. And it would let me go up to closer to 28, but it wouldn't let me settle on 20. So this slider, like the usability of it, prevented this company from getting more tip from me because I left it at 19. I wasn't able to get it to 20. So, I mean, and we also have signaling exclusion on the colors, but really just the usability failed there. Okay. And I think this is my last one before we get to, okay. Okay, great. This one I found last night, and I'm so excited I found it to talk to you all about it. So I found this called doahappydance.com. It's like a CBD lotion website, I'm guessing. And I found it because it claims to be accessibility centered. I want to just take you to their website. I've linked it here, their accessibility statement on their website. So they have an accessibility section on their website already. This is signaling inclusion. And they have their certificate status of like conformance. They've conformed to the web guidelines. They even tell you the measures that they've taken, the browsers and compatibility with accessible technologies. They've talked about everything that they've made to make it accessible. They talked about the technical specifications with their code, other testing that they've done, and feedback. So they're really trying to center inclusion. And yet we have colors that signal exclusion. And these are from their mobile experience. But in order to access this, you have to click on this small circle of a person in a wheelchair, and it's pink, so it's already in accessible colors. The yellow here on white and accessible colors. The equity of having a digital experience, but signaling that anyone in a wheelchair would need to use this is completely signaling exclusion. A person in a wheelchair may have an additional disability that would require them to use extra features, but they also may not. So using one person's disability as representation for all others, it isn't appropriate and exclusive. So when you click on this button, you're taken to a pull-out window that allows you to make adjustments to the website based on your needs. So when I adjusted some things such as color, we see the color contrast is now different based on your needs. And the far right image, you're able to actually have the alt text pop out of the images so you can read them. So just a word about this. They have designed a website that is inaccessible from the beginning, that you can customize to be accessible based on your needs. So much of accessibility that they're following is following the rules, following each compliance step that's outlined by the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. But they are not practicing UX design or user experience design, because they're saying, we have designed it to be inaccessible for you, but if you need to fix it, you can. Why not practice universal design, which is accessible to everyone from the beginning, and that there's not a separate experience for someone who needs it? Why create a separate experience instead of just one? It's excluding someone based on their needs. So we could talk about, we could get into this website, we could look over everything specifically, but to me, they're following the compliance checklist, but what they're missing is how people use and interact with it, and what's signaling usability and equity. And they're specifically not doing any testing with users with disability, because unless they're doing it just on being able to make the changes, but why make the changes when your site could just be inclusive from the beginning? So that's sort of my 2 cents here on, you can follow the checklist, but you need to be also considering the other aspects of usability and equity in your design. Okay, so what I have next, what I'm just going to summarize with us before we sort of move on to the next little step of our agenda, is a call to action. This is a collective call to action for all of us together, is to really, let's extend our knowledge around accessibility, usability, and equity. So I've created a few resources for you all, a little library. This is based on your needs and abilities this upcoming week or in the future. I've gathered them by reading, watching, listening, or noticing. So first, I mentioned I would share Tatiana Mack's information. She has a great talk on inclusive design that I highly recommend. Okay, so for reading, I have a list of things that I recommend. If that's of your interest, definitely check out Data for Black Lives. That's really important that we're all following that. if watching is more of your jam, I've linked some great videos. The Inclusive Design Toolkit by Kat Holmes is so amazing. There's 4 or 5 videos that I usually start some of my workshops off on. They're so great. Listen, if you're more into listening, I have a couple podcasts that I would recommend. And maybe you're more on just the space where you're noticing and absorbing a lot of this. So I have a couple challenges for you there. So we're going to read, watch, listen, notice collectively as you move forward from this talk today. So I just want to summarize our digital accessibility, the talk that we've talked about, making sure that it's accessible, usable, equitable. I truly believe the future is accessible, but it's really only going to be that way if we build it that way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kari. That was wonderful.
Yeah. The next 2 pieces are for the next like 20 or so minutes. So if you need to take off, thank you so much for coming. And if you want to see my report and or do an exercise and hear tips from my work with screen reader users, that's next. Things, but I also want to provide you, like, overwhelm you with all the resources because I'm so excited that people want to talk about accessibility. I think my team's like, okay, we've heard her talk about it for so long now.
Can I ask one question that we had earlier in the chat from Michelle G?
Yes.
That is a question about QA and wanting to know what resources are good. And that might be something that you're going over right now. Is this a testing scenario that they might be able to use?
Like QA meaning like quality assurance.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Katerina also posted a lot of tools in the chat, which are some that my company uses. So that might be a good answer to that question.
Listen, oh, thanks for whoever shared Tatiana Max. Yeah, thanks, Trisha. When you said tools, I'm going to share 2.
Let's see, Katerina shared Lighthouse, Wave, Axe, and Accessibility Tree in Mozilla.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, the Accessibility Tree in Mozilla is great. They have some good videos, which I always appreciate. I'm going to share 2 tools that I use. So as a designer, I use accessibility to make justifications for changes and for strategic growth. I don't use it for quality assurance always. So we can have a conversation about how you might go about doing that. But for me, it's a way of like teaching others about the impact that it's having on students and why they need to change. Because for me, my users are students, but same for customers. But like maybe we could talk a little bit more about like what QA means to them and what product they're testing, because like a website would be different from like an internal product or something.
I see Michelle's still on, so if you want to add some more information, go ahead. If not, we can continue on with what you were planning.
Okay. Yeah, hop in, Michelle, if you had something more specific you wanted to ask. I'm going to share my screen.
Oh, I just had mentioned before that I had tried using the screen reader on my Mac and was like, wow, that was really difficult.
Yeah, it's a skill. I told my screen reader tester that I have a lot to learn, that it's like my lack of knowledge there. Even just doing some testing with VoiceOver, I get lost really easily. So I feel you. Okay, so I'm going to share a report that might help get to the QA a little bit. It's a little bit about, and then I'm going to share some tips, and then we can do an exercise if we have time, because I thought I would have lots of time, and of course we're, running up. So actually, I'm going to click on it. So I wanted to share a user testing report that I share with my team, because I think that people always feel like it's more technical and complicated than it needs to be. And I've been doing these tests every month or every other month for the last year with my team. And when I do intensive technical reviews, my team is always overwhelmed and it doesn't really always get where I need to go. And when I do a little UX with it, which is basically just a report on the experience, I get so much farther with this. I don't know if this is where you would start, but I just wanted to share an example so that you can start to visualize that it's not always super complicated. So I've removed the name of my student for their anonymity, and I've also removed the name of the product just because I didn't want to slam them too hard. So this is a product that's used in education, ed tech, and they have built a separate experience for students with disabilities, already signaling a problem. So they said that just like with the Do a Happy Dance lotion website, we're not going to build our website to be accessible to all people, but we're going to create a separate experience, like a separate space for you over here in the corner. So we tested that to better understand if it was fully accessible or not. It's a 2-page document. I made it really short and brief. I wrote down comments about their experience and then quotes from the student tester. That's it. Some things to highlight were like, it took multiple steps to log in, at least 5, and required my help, which I'm a sighted user. So that already is so frustrating. Just the student couldn't even figure out how to get in. So I've shared all of this for you. Additionally, they were asked to be able to not only log in, the ask was, can you read what's in the slides that are posted, and can you post a comment and interact? If you were to take this out to like a commercial website, this would be the same thing. Can you complete a task? Can you put a thing in your shopping cart? Can you upload a form? And so some of their comments about like buttons not being labeled, I've shared. Maybe they had a header as a button, and that was confusing because it's an action and they don't expect headers to be actions. They're more like mile markers. Here's a quote saying, I felt like there was not enough information for me to successfully navigate the website. Perhaps adding more headers and links, but I was not able to access other voice comments. When I tried to leave a voice comment, I think I recorded it, but I'm not sure if I did. I had a hard time to figure out if it actually stopped recording. JAWS did not notify me. So the students signaling, I can't do this thing, here's where I got stuck. And their experience in noting just what happened for them is so successful for other people. It's not critiquing their work necessarily. They can come in and take away a lot from this. This works for my design team, my support team, my teaching learning assessment team. All my teams that I work with take stuff away from this. It's applicable to all of them. It's not super technical. I just write out the steps and talk about the experience. So the big takeaway here was they tried to go to the universal site, which is the separate accessible site. They had to then go to a register, then go to a sign in, then go to a sign out, then go back to a sign in order to sign in. So that's frustrating. Yeah, so there's another quote that's not on here, but the student said, I don't understand why there's a separate website for me and the other students don't have the same experience as me. So I think that's important to note is we're not designing separate experiences for different groups of people. We need to design all our experiences to be accessible and flexible to everyone on that spectrum. So I wanted to share some tips from my work with screen reader users over the years. Not just like a report, just I wanted to simplify it because I think sometimes we build it up into something super complicated. So just a few tips. Okay, so screen reader users tend to get like stuck when the page order doesn't read as designed. So sometimes they will flip around and navigate through links or through headers. Those are the two that I see the most. Something that feedback I was given on our website is, oh, our homepage has 300 links. That's a lot to navigate through if you're trying to quickly find something. When that order doesn't make sense, when you have like big blocks of images that are disrupting that pattern, it's easy to get lost. When links aren't self-describing, they get lost. When web elements don't match their intended function, so I mentioned this earlier, the one that I think see the most is that buttons are headers or buttons are links that are, you know, not labeled as to where they're going. So this tends to get them confused because they expect it to be a certain way and they get lost. So really it's about simplicity, making it simple. Another one around form labels. Sorry, the videos are blocking what it says. Form labels should indicate what information the person should fill out. So if you aren't telling them what they should put in, their name, etc., that's going to get confusing on like, what do they do? I think I had just summarizing around making it as simple and as clear as possible. This is more a takeaway that I take away from my course development with faculty, but they always think more is better. And I'll tell you, especially with like reflecting on COVID and how the world is changing, please use less. If we can take out all this language to do the same thing, let's just do it. One step instead of 9 steps. A lot of the technology I integrate into our learning management system asks students to sign in 5, 6, 7, 8, I've seen 9 times just to get to where they need to read or engage. One step to content, like one step to the task is so important. Okay, so before I move on, we're going to move to our exercise. Were there any questions or any discussions anyone wanted to bring up before we move to our exercise? I think I only have like 5 minutes. We'll be really quick. Okay. So honoring your needs at this moment, like reflecting, if you're in a like sit back, listen and learn kind of mode, then like please honor that. If you're like, let's get this going, please participate and join in. So the 2 tools I'm going to share with you are the WebAIM Wave tool and the color contrast like checker. So Wave is, if you Google WebAIM Wave, you're going to come here. If you do the color contrast checker, you can come here. So please engage with color contrast, play around with like seeing what passes according to these ratings. And just know that AAA fail on large text is okay. I think that it's a discussion to be had if it passes on all the other levels. But what I would like to do is do a like accessibility test. Maybe this comes back to the QA text question. And I was gonna try, I had a website ready to go, but please, this is your exercise. Like if you have a website you're dying to check, I'm gonna do the Humane Society. Please, this is your exercise. Take a website, plug it in here, and we're gonna evaluate it. Okay, I'm gonna also do this live with the Oregon Humane Society, but if you're dying to go play with this while listening, please go ahead and do this on your own as well, like play along with us. Most importantly here, I'll come to this slide, is just pay attention to what do you notice. I use these reviews, it's a tool that a lot of people start to become familiar with. So I use this as a tool to just start paying attention to the errors and things that come up. So if I just plug in Humane Society here, this is gonna give us some information about the accessibility of this website. So the summary here is we have a few errors, a few alerts, only 1 ARIA label. Some things to pay attention, 1 ARIA label, maybe not enough, 400, way too many. Sometimes you can get ARIA label happy and it just makes things more confusing. Contrast areas, 58 errors, excuse me. Already we can just in 1 minute, we can start saying let's do a deep dive on some of this. And we can start looking at it. So when you go to view details, you can start to see all the items that are low contrast. It's pulling it up first for you. You can click on the item and it's going to take it to you. So just start playing around with this as a tool. I use it, like I said, just for information to get a general sense of what's accessible, what's not. Remember that usability and equity are a huge piece of this. Representation matters, how people use this matters. Doing testing with people with disabilities matters.
So really quickly,
yeah.
Could you quickly define what ARIA is?
Sure, it is an acronym. I don't know what it stands for. But it is a, let's go to Google and have them define it. But it's going to be labels in your code. And actually, WebAIM is going to have a lot of information on it. So this is a great place to start if you're looking. Someone could drop that in the chat. But it's essentially going to give extra accessibility information for your code. Let's see what it says. Accessible rich internet applications. So it's going to enhance interactive controls such as menus and sliders and pop-ups. If you follow Hayden Pickering, I link him in one of those resources under listen or read. And it's Hayden Pickering, that. His work on inclusive components and inclusive web design is going to be a really good place to start because he has a really good podcast about over ARIA labeling and what that means for your users. He is a great expert to look at for doing this work. I know a lot less about it. Does that help for ARIA? Okay.
Yeah, it looks like that.
I know that we have a hard sort of stop at 7:15. So although we could do like a little bit more, we could talk about like this whole part here is an image. So this is an image, even though it's meaning to look like a button, this text is an image. This is an exercise that you can start becoming familiar with and understanding what it's flagging. And we can certainly, I can stay on a little bit longer and we can talk a little bit more. And I'll just leave like, I'll leave with our last slide. Leave you with the thought of like one thing you've learned here today that you can put into action tomorrow or this next week. And remember that noticing is a really big piece of this work, especially recognizing exclusion. So be thinking about that as you move forward. And then collectively, if all of us start beginning to think about this, our accessibility knowledge and voice and power will start to extend. And that is my last slide to just say thank you all for staying on the call this long. It's been so great. I'm gonna stop sharing my slides. I hope to be a resource for any of your questions. If you're ever like feeling something's fishy about accessibility, I will try to help you if I have time or guide you to resources because we're a community and we support each other. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kari. That was wonderful. If they did want to reach out to you, what would be your preferred method?
Yeah, let me put now I have chat. Put my email in the chat.
Awesome.
Oh, but everyone loves accessibility. This is so great. Kari Goin at Gmail. I see a question about typography. Yeah, my experience with typography is to use like free fonts because that like when you do paid fonts that creates a barrier. But I want to bring you to a book that's amazing. I'm pulling it up on my second screen and I'll drop it in the chat called Cross-Cultural Design. And it is so great because it talks about like racist fonts and it talks about other things that are it's so good. So check out that book on typography.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? You can drop them in the chat or turn on your, turn off mute.
Yeah, we can talk about it all.
I think your question of like what, it'd be interesting to hear if anybody wants to share what they're hoping to do to implement this. I think for me, I'm a developer, and I probably leave the checking to QA more than I should. So actually running my sites through those types of checkers more, I think it is a good next step for me.
That's a great first step.
Yeah, I was just thinking of all the websites I've built recently and just kind of thinking back. I'm like, oh, crud. I'm gonna go back to later this week and see if there's any quick changes, and if I can, because I'm sure if I contact the client and say, hey, I'm gonna make this quick change, will take 15 minutes, you'll be more accessible, I'm sure they won't have a problem with it. So yeah.
Probably get some brownie points too. For
and remember, like, you're not going to fix all the websites you designed in like one day, but you know, a small change like a font color or like even just a couple language items around like removing click here's, like that makes a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Even I think it would be for me an interesting thing to look at my own portfolio, because I'm sure there are a lot of holes. So that might be a good exercise if people are building their portfolios to try to build this into your own website.
The fact that you have a portfolio, that's been on my backlog for so long. Definitely need to get around to that. I think I can also second just, I have a multifaceted role. So when I do the development side of things, I really want to kind of have more of a comprehensive understanding of the options that I have with the ARIA tag. I know Bootstrap builds them in a fair amount for you if you're using their templates. And we use that a lot in our software applications. And then when I design, I just started using Figma. We're trying it out as opposed to Adobe XD. We try all sorts of different things. But they have the Stark plugin, which has a contrast checker, and it suggests colors that are better with the AA or the AAA, depending which guideline you're using. So I'm looking forward to using that more. We already kind of fixed one of our primary buttons. It's such a small win, but it's just nice to know that we're having those green check marks that pass. Just kind of paying more attention to the procedure, like integrating accessibility checks into the process is probably going to reveal a lot of low-hanging fruits, I think. Yeah, like you said, Kari, to change the font color. That could just be a win for you. It was the Stark plugin, Lindsay.
Stark?
Stark. Yeah.
Kari, I liked what you were mentioning about not asking gender. And it's maybe a little bit off of design, but in UX research, I'm currently in a boot camp, and they, doing user surveys and designing those, the recommendation is to get like key demographics. So maybe just your opinion and experience on gathering those demographics. Kind of my test that I did was to ask for gender identity and start with non-cis male as the first one. And the feedback that I got from my cis male mentor was that it was confusing because it started with transgender, female to male, and then the different pronouns, and then the second one is transgender, non-binary, agender. So just kind of like your experience with that, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, let's talk about it. This is such a great question. I have two things I want to respond, but like, you know, like, hey, Lindsay, former student of mine at Hack Oregon, this is great to see you again. We can always talk more and more about it. And I love you're doing UX Bootcamp. Asking the question about gender is important if you have a specific reason to do so, because you are potentially putting a person into a place of harm by asking that. So you need to be intentional about asking, and maybe giving a short explanation as to how you plan to use that information. I think that that's going to be really useful. We do that with our students all the time. yeah, having Two-Spirit included is important. And then I want to address your feedback. I was in a anti-racist pedagogy workshop a few weeks ago, and pedagogy is sort of like the art and science of learning, how we do the best practices in teaching. And it was a Latinx presenter who started his presentation by saying, I don't create my slides for the white heteronormative male center, right? I don't design for them. And so like if we take that, I've taken that to heart a little bit, and that like your designs aren't there to center white, heteronormative, middle-class, Christian, straight men. So it's confusing for him, but he's not who we're centering. Even if it's your specific target audience, we need to do everything we can collectively to push against that vision of the future, right? We need to center women of color and intersectional identities always in our work. So I would always just have that mindset of like, we are not doing this work. Even if you're having 10 men give you feedback that this design is bad, make this change, you have to say, I'm not doing this for you. I'm not tailoring my presentation or my slides for you. I'm speaking to the one woman of color in the room, and I'm doing it for them. So like, but that's hard sometimes when you're receiving that like large vocal voice of feedback who are used to having their voices centered. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Warning at the beginning of the article.
That was just in response to someone asking. So Nikki asked for a checklist somewhere on the slideshow. Is there any way you can distill accessibility into a checklist?
Everyone wants a checklist, right? Well, remember the Do a Happy Dance CBD cream? They followed all the guidelines, and they're already signaling an exclusion in a number of ways. So that what that tells me is they have no one with disabilities on their team, probably no one with intersectional identities. So they're probably an all-white staff that's fully abled. And that to me is a problem, because that's who their audience is. They're not thinking about anybody else outside of that bias. And that's a problem. That's not the design of the future. So you want a checklist, it's a good place to start, and it's a good place to get like knowledge. And I use checklists all the time to say like, we need to go from like no accessibility to some. So we need some, but you just can't stop there, right? You have to keep extending your knowledge and doing your reading and making connections, right? Like something for myself is like, I don't have enough people of color with disabilities in my network that I can like call on and follow their work. And I need to start, they're out there, right? I need to start building those connections. So there's always a little bit more that we can each challenge ourselves on with accessibility. The webbing checklist is a really good place to start because it's updated to the new 2.1 standards. I hope that's helpful. There was another question about...
Ken asked about the legal implications on a non-accessible site. Any lawsuit?
It's sort of who can you tell me, Ken, are you working for like a government or a university, or are you working for a for-profit, or like what your lens is?
Yeah. Hello, this is Ken. I'm not working in any of those particular areas, but it's just a general question. Something I read a few years ago.
Yeah, so I work in education. We are required by law to make things accessible, and we don't. We make our front-facing website, we attempt to do it, but anything internal we're not required to. And at the same time we are. So but it's potential for a lawsuit anywhere and everywhere, and you will lose your accessibility lawsuit if you get sued. You'll lose. Okay. I mean, you can look at Target, you can look at like Harvard, you can look at, I mean, there's so many examples. So you don't want to be sued. You want to be showing that you're demonstrating doing the work. If you're a government or you receive government money in any way, like education, then you really better be on it. But I mean, there's tons of for-profit companies that have all lost their lawsuits.
Yeah, maybe a topic that's beyond
Yeah.
the scope of what we're talking about here, but also just to keep in mind that the laws are specific to each country. For example, I build websites that are in 12 different countries, so they all have different requirements. So that's just another layer of complexity around that particular topic.
That's a good point. Yeah. We do a lot of work with the UK and their rules are a lot different too. Yeah.
Well, I think we're getting close to 7:30 here, so I think this is a good time to wrap up. If we don't have any last burning questions. Thank you so much, Kari. This was so informative and just, yeah, a really nice deep dive into this topic. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all so much and for staying. And I feel like we could stay and talk another hour, but thank you all for coming. And I may say your name wrong, but Chinami, please tell me how you say your name. How you say your name?
Oh, you're on mute. There you are.
Hello, yeah. My name is Chineme. Can you hear me?
Chinami.
Chineme.
Chinami.
I'm gonna say it wrong.
You're pretty close.
I'm so close. I will practice and learn it. But yeah, you offered to follow up on LinkedIn, and please find me. And I have just a small group, UX designers in Portland, but you're welcome to join. And we just talk and share and do portfolio reviews, that kind of thing. So always here to be a resource for the community.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
And
I'll
thank you for
definitely
coming
look
from
into it.
so far away. That's what I wanted to say. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great evening. And we
Thank
will follow
you.
up as soon as we can with the slides and the recording with the transcriptions on them as well. Thank you so much, Kari.
Thank
Thank
you all.
you.
Have a good night.
Bye.